There are many things that can cause a power outage. It might be small and localized to your street or neighborhood. It might be across your entire city, state, or a wide region of the country. It can last from just a few minutes to several hours, days, or even weeks. You never know when you're going to need power, but whenever possible, if you have the opportunity and you have the capability, get yourself some type of backup power supply. This is the Urban Sentinel, and let's get into it. Alright folks, now as we get into this video, I want to tell you ahead of time, this is not a sponsored video, it's not an ad video. The generator that I'm going to be showing you and talking about, it's simply an overview of this generator, and you can take the information and do with it what you will. Now this is the FIRMAN dual fuel generator. It is a gas and a propane powered generator. Now I know that there are a lot of different manufacturers out there, and FIRMAN is just one of the many that exist. And there's also solar generators out there as well, and diesel power generators. But for the most part, most people that have the ability to get a generator, finances being what they are, tend to go for the more affordable price of a fossil fuel generator, primarily gas. The dual fuel has an advantage that I'll tell you about in just a few seconds. So the first thing that you'll notice with this particular generator is, as I stated, it's dual fuel. It uses both gasoline and propane, and it has two distinct areas to get the fuel source to the generator. This generator also has an electric start, but it also comes with a manual pull start as well. The battery, fully charged, aids in the electric start. 4 outlets of different amp ratings on them, and I'll show you those outlets also as we go through this. So what we've got up top is it is an 8-gallon tank for gasoline. Has a gas gauge level indicator over here, and it actually uses a series of pictures showing you exactly how to fill, operate, start, switch between gasoline as well as between the propane connections that it uses. And down here is the propane inlet, liquid propane. You'll see the approximate wattage rating that it utilizes between gasoline and propane. The max wattage for this at 9400 versus 8450. The running watts at 7500 versus 6750 for the generator. And it's got a simple, easy to understand selector switch. Right now in the off mode, if you were to operate the generator on gasoline, turning it to gas. If you were going to operate on the propane, switching over to propane. Power indicator light, as you saw on there. 2 amp 31 amp fuses. And then we have the 4 outlets that it comes with. Alright, so we've got a 50 amp 120 to 240 volt connector. We've got a 30 amp 120 240. Another 30 amp 120 240. And then a dual set of 20 amp 120 GFCI. Now with each one of those, as you notice, they have different connections. So depending upon the connector that you're using, say for an RV, to run an RV or to run some other higher voltage equipment, you'd make sure that you had the proper connection going into it, as well as if you're going to plug anything into the standard GFCI outlets here as well. Then of course it has the 20, 30, and a 30 amp fuse here for resetting in case you overload the system. You got a 12 volt, 15 amp hour for the battery, lead acid, oil fill, and it has low oil shutoff. So when the motor is low on oil, it won't start, which is an advantage because an engine like this, you can easily burn out your engine very quickly, not having proper oil levels in it. Now, when I bought the generator, it did come with the wheel kit, and I will say definitely getting a wheel kit on most of these generators is something that if it doesn't come with it, buy it as an extra, because Out of the box, this thing was over 160 plus pounds. Very cumbersome to maneuver. Luckily, gravity helps out a lot. But you get the wheel kit on, and it also has utility handle, so this way you can easily lift up and move the generator from one location to another. We've got the screened exhaust over here with the muffler. And again, safety issues, you don't want to have it right next to your house. You don't want to have it up against bushes or anything flammable like that. Preferably, if you have the space, 20 feet away from any structure to ensure that you also don't get any poisoning from the exhaust, but also reduce the chances of you setting something on fire. So if you've got an area that's got dry grass and leaves, you need to clear that out. If you can, put it on asphalt or concrete or any place where it's not potentially going to cause a fire. And the back end of it, basically looking at the area of the carburetor and the fuel inlet coming from the fuel tank above, going into the engine area. Now, when running the generator on gasoline, as I stated before, it has an 8-gallon supply. Going through the manual, basically if you run this generator at half load, you'll get about 12 hours of run time, maybe a little bit more, on the gasoline. You're going to get a reduced level somewhere around, I believe, 6 to 8 hours on propane. Now, with gasoline, one of the things that you have to remember is storing gasoline, gas loses a lot of its effective octane potential as time goes by over the month. So as a rough example, if you have 93 octane gasoline, fresh and new, sitting in a container, over 3-6 months or so, the octane equivalent has dropped down somewhere to 89, 87. After about a year and a half, it's down around the 85 area. When you hit the 2-year mark, it's pretty much not necessarily inert, but running a vehicle, a car, or even a generator can cause a lot of buildup and fouling in the engine, and you get less efficiency from it. So even though you're putting in the same volume amount of fuel, you're actually getting less energy efficiency from that gasoline. Now, adding fuel stabilizers and preservatives can extend it a little bit, and you can even do a little bit of a mix and match if you get those octane boosters and add that to your fuel, or for fuel that you're storing up specifically for a generator, you've got those gallons set aside. Maybe you do put a little bit of higher octane mixed in with it to help raise that octane level up a little bit as it goes. But you should always rotate through your fuel stores anyway, especially with the generator. You want to be able to do at least once a month or once every month and a half. Start it up, run it for a half hour or so, make sure everything is going well. Check your maintenance list to make sure that the oil's where it should be and the air filters are clean and everything else. Now, running this on propane with the propane connector, which does come with the generator, you're able to connect a standard propane cylinder right up to it. Now, a full cylinder, I believe, roughly where you find most of them, anywhere from the hardware stores and things like that, there's nothing that you need to do other than connecting it up with the actual connection itself. And propane as a whole stays and works a lot better than gasoline does. You may have issues if it's extremely cold outside in terms of the propane tank itself, but we're also talking either sustained temperatures down in the single digits or into the negative digits, depending upon where you're at. Now, the primary advantage that you have with propane is it's far easier to store, and it's also a lot easier to acquire, because if you're in a large regional blackout situation where there's no power for 75, 150, 200 miles around you, a lot of gas stations don't have backup systems to run the pumps. And even if they did, you're going to have a far, far longer line of cars traveling all across the region to get to a working gas station to get more fuel for their generators. Whereas, as I said before, propane tanks, you can find them convenience stores, supermarkets, hardware stores, lots of places, and it's far easier to pick up 2-3 propane cylinders, load them into your vehicle, and drive back home. Or even if you've got a hand cart or a shopping cart, put 2 or 3 of them in there and push it on back. Now, one of the primary reasons I chose a conventional fuel generator over a solar generator is for the wattage that each of the different generator packages offer, and the solar panel and battery combination that you need to sufficiently charge up the batteries, and then the length of time for the power draw, the load on those batteries for what you get. Financially speaking, for me, I would need far more panels and batteries within those kits to sustain us in, let's say, a 72-hour or up to 96-hour power loss situation. Which, yes, solar power absolutely is beneficial on everything from the overall renewable source as it goes, because effectively when you're not using it, it's getting charged up by the sun and the batteries stay on standby. And several of the solar charger systems can interconnect, simply plug into an outlet in your house, trickle charge the batteries while you're on grid power, and then should the power go off, you automatically have charged up batteries and the system able to handle the load that's there. But for that cost to basically have my house with standby power for that amount of time would have cost me more, closer to tens of thousands of dollars for a small system, in which case then I might as well go the bigger leap and go to a full solar house install. But there are also a lot of regulations within my state when it comes to having backup batteries connected to a solar system, connected to a grid tie-in setup, because the state just simply does not allow you to have a standalone residential system. So you have to stay connected to the grid, even if your solar power and your batteries could sustain you indefinitely. One of the other reasons why I chose this over just a standard single fuel is for that dual capability that I talked about. Gasoline right now is still available, it's still plentiful. Propane is also available, but if it's a situation where I know ahead of time, okay, they did work on the power lines near my house, they estimated a window of about 4 hours that the power would be out. Honestly, for my area, 4 hours really isn't that long, so we weren't even concerned about getting the generator hooked up. And the work actually only took them about an hour and a half that we had no power. When it's a situation where I know the power is going to be out much longer, or they're unable, the authorities, the power companies are unable to determine if you're going to get power in the next 24 hours, 48 hours. We had a freak winter storm about a decade ago, and that was the exact thing that happened. The power went out, it was almost statewide. Our power company and other power companies from other states came in, and it was an indeterminate window. We were without power in our area for almost 7 straight days before work crews got within the area and started putting up the lines and fixing the systems. So in a situation like that, at that time, I didn't have a generator. So having a generator would be good, but if it were strictly gasoline, the gas stations in my surrounding areas didn't have power. Most of them were scrambling, trying to get generators to power them, especially a lot of the smaller independent ones. They were traveling 2-3 states away, paying $3,000, $5,000 for a gas generator to bring back to hook up to their systems, because they were losing money, they were losing product by the simple fact is they had no way to power their facility. With the propane, it has that added portability. I can walk to 3 different locations within 1 mile that all sell propane, and I can carry 1 tank in each hand and come back. I've got a hand truck, I can stack 3 on that, strap it down with bungees, and wheel it on back. So the ability for me to refuel with propane when I need a short-term fix, I can rotate through those a lot easier than finding a place that has power, waiting in line for people that are also filling up their 1 or 2 gallon cans, because you got to remember, if you've got a widespread power outage that comes up suddenly, they're going to limit how much fuel people can get. So you may wait in line a half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour. Your tank may hold 8 gallons, but they may only let you get 4. So now after that, you go back to turn around and come back and load up the next 4, or do you try to make it to the next place carrying the gasoline that you have? These are the decisions you have to make. Having that propane, that's an advantage. Now, this particular generator is the dual fuel. They also make a tri-fuel which connects to natural gas, but I don't have natural gas in my residence, so it really wasn't of any use to me. But again, that's an alternate to the system, that if you have natural gas and you've got a connection and you get a licensed contractor to do the install, you can have an alternate form of energy on that as well. And honestly, if you have natural gas and you've got a generator hooked up to it, that's going to be your first and foremost, your go-to. Now, as you can tell, the generator is inside my garage, which that is not where it would be should I use it. I've got an area designated out in my yard near the house where I'd run the cable line connector from the generator back into the house. I'm in the process, or I will be in the process, of making a new interlock connection for the generator specifically so I can allocate it to a designated section of my circuit breakers and run the power that way once I've turned off the main breaker from the grid. One of the other things I'll be looking to do is make what's called a quiet box. Now, a quiet box, yes, it does cut down on the noise. This generator isn't that noisy. I forget the exact decibel ratings, but it's quieter than my gas lawnmower is. So in terms of running, it's not that loud. Now, granted, in a prolonged situation where the grid is down, sounds like generators and lawnmowers are going to be heard significantly farther away because there's not a lot of ambient noise going on. Even though cars may be up and running, street lights will be out, you're not going to have as many people doing things inside their house that make noise. They're not going to be vacuuming, they're not going to be running the microwave, the TV, because they most likely don't have power. So even if they sit inside, sounds travel, and sooner or later, by day 3, day 4, day 5, the sound of that hum at 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it is that you need to charge up your generator to get your batteries up to keep your freezer box cold, people will start to notice. They might come looking, they might not come looking. Having a quiet box insulates and reduces the sound. It's still going to make noise, you're still going to be able to hear it, but it significantly reduces the sound that would travel out in that general direction, that ambient noise that kind of fills the background in most people's ears when it gets real quiet out. It also aids in providing a little bit of shelter and protection, so visually speaking, depending upon your layout of your property, it's not immediately seen. It's something that won't catch the eye right away. Now, granted, if someone's looking, if they're listening and they hear it, they're going to be close enough at that point that they can start to figure out where that sound is and move in those areas, and sooner or later they're going to figure out it's got to be coming from that area over there. So if it's an individual or a group that are looking to take a generator, then you move to the next step, which is wherever I plant this quiet box, I'm going to make basically an anchor point of cement and a steel U-bolt, and I've already got a heavy-duty chain lock set up that I'm basically wheeling it out, anchoring it into that spot. So should it be 3 o'clock in the morning but we don't have the generator running, but someone decides to risk it all and come onto the property to try to take the generator because they spotted it from another road, 400 feet away, it'll slow them down. It may not stop them if they're determined, it may not stop them, but it will slow them down. Or at the minimum, when they realize that they have to go through a bit more work than what it's worth, they might move on. So, some of the primary things you want to think about when you're getting your generators. First, look at the total power that you use in your house or apartment. Also, if you're renting, you got to make sure that you can actually connect your generator to your power. Now, in some cases, especially for apartments and dense unit buildings, a natural gas or propane or gasoline, any fossil fuel generator, that's not going to work out well for your advantage. It's too tight of an area. You might not have some place to keep the generator outside of your residence. In that case, I would definitely suggest going for the solar generator setups versus the conventional fossil fuel. And speaking quickly on that, simple thing that you can think about is you have your solar panels that most likely will come with that generator, and depending upon the make or model, it may have a built-in battery for the primary control box, and then you can buy a secondary battery. Whatever the case is, you get a moderate amount but a decent amount of power from that. Look at the critical items that you need that you can unplug from the existing wall outlets. Get yourself one of those contractor surge suppressors, and they also have batteries in them for uninterruptible power sources. Plugging that in provides you additional power. So if you only need to run the refrigerator because you want to keep your food fresh, and you need to run a small set of electronic devices, your cell phone, preferably if possible a handheld radio or at least some type of emergency radio, and a few other things, just this way you can maintain communications, be aware of what's around you, then that will provide more than enough power for you under those conditions. Now, if it's extreme environment, it's, middle of winter, it's -5 degrees out, or it's in the middle of summer and it's hitting 102 and 30% humidity, yes, you're going to want to have some of those creature comforts, and the battery power and amount of time that it takes to run and charge up may not balance out. So again, you've got to work with your environment, doing the best that you can. But a solar generator would be an advantage on that aspect, as well as on the quiet aspect that you just don't hear it. So even if you decide to do that for a house, you've got your own house, property, everything else like that, there are still advantages to that. And if you have good sunlight in an area from the interior, you could even take those solar panels and place them up on the inside of the windows, let them get in the sun, charge up the batteries, and then at night you can pull them down, get them out of the way, and then you use your system as you need to use it. Whereas with my generator here, it's simply a matter of wheeling it out, starting it up, connecting everything, and then running what I need to. And based upon the cycles of the refrigerator, freezer box, everything else like that, I wouldn't need to run it 24/7. I wouldn't need to even run it 12 hours. I'd need to run it about 2, maybe 3 hours during a 24-hour cycle, because I'd have the temperature turned up just a little bit on the freezer and the refrigerator. Yes, it will take 24 hours of run time to effectively bring it up to that higher level, but it's still incrementally moving it up while it's running, keeping things a little bit cooler. And then of course you plan out what you're going to be taking out. Anyway, these are things that you need to think about when it comes to using backup power supplies such as generators of any type. Plan accordingly, look at how much power you draw, look at the critical items that you need to use and how long do you need to use them. Are they a turn on and turn off situation, or is it something that needs to keep running? All of this plays into a factor when determining what type of system you have, and it's always best to edge on the side of prudence and get a little bit more power than what you would actually use, rather than not have enough when you need it as a critical thing. Well, that's it for now. I'll catch you guys in the next one.